There exists within you a hidden architect of your failures, a silent saboteur that operates from the shadows of your consciousness, orchestrating your most destructive patterns while you remain blissfully unaware. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Carl Jung. Onward thinkers, my name is Mister Halvig, and you're watching The Rational Wise. Carl Gustav Jung, the pioneer who dared to map the uncharted territories of the human psyche, understood something that most of us spend our entire lives running from. He recognized that within each person dwells not merely a conscious self, but a shadow, a repository of everything we've rejected, denied, and buried beneath the veneer of our acceptable persona. This shadow, it's not merely some abstract psychological concept. It is the unseen puppeteer pulling the strings of your self-sabotage. It is the voice whispering justifications for your failures. It is the force that transforms your noblest intentions into your most devastating mistakes. The tragedy, most people believe they've confronted their darkness simply because they've acknowledged they have flaws, but acknowledgement without integration is merely intellectual masturbation. True shadow work requires something far more terrifying than admission. It requires surrender to the very aspects of yourself you've spent decades trying to kill. Today we embark on a journey into the depths of your unexamined self. I will reveal to you 7 unmistakable signs, 7 psychological fingerprints that betray the shadow's hidden dominion over your life. By the end of this exploration, you will possess the clarity to recognize whether you've merely played with your darkness or whether you've genuinely faced the monster that lives within. This is not content for the faint of heart. This is awakening. Sign 7. Our 7th sign, and the first we'll explore, that betrays your shadow's unexamined power, is your relationship with criticism. When feedback feels like a personal assassination, when every suggestion becomes a declaration of war against your very essence, you are witnessing the shadow's defensive fortress in full operation. The unacknowledged shadow transforms criticism into existential threat because it contains all the qualities you violently rejected about yourself. When someone points to a flaw in your behavior, they're inadvertently pointing toward the shadow. And the shadow, desperate to remain hidden, activates every defense mechanism at its disposal. Jung understood that this defensiveness stems from what he called inflation, the ego's desperate attempt to maintain its illusion of perfection by projecting its rejected aspects into the unconscious realm. The more violently you defend against criticism, the more you reveal the exact territories your shadow dominates. Consider the tale of King Lear, a monarch so inflated with his own righteousness that he banished his most truthful daughter, Cordelia, for refusing to flatter his ego. His shadow, his pride, his blindness, his desperate need for validation remained so unexamined that he literally destroyed his kingdom rather than face the mirror his daughter held up to his character. In our modern world, this manifests as the colleague who explodes when given performance feedback, the partner who turns relationship discussions into counterattacks, the social media warrior who blocks anyone who challenges their worldview. They've confused their ego's comfort with their soul's growth. Begin practicing what Jung called holding the tension. When criticism arises, instead of immediately defending, ask yourself, what if this person is seeing something I refuse to see? Create a daily practice of seeking one piece of constructive feedback and receiving it in complete silence. Sign 6. The 6th sign reveals itself through the phenomenon Jung called projection, but not the elementary projection most people recognize. This is the systematic, compulsive need to locate your own hidden darkness in everyone around you. The unintegrated shadow operates like a psychological searchlight, constantly scanning the external world for traits that mirror its own suppressed contents. You become a detective of others' flaws while remaining blind to your own identical patterns. This isn't occasional judgment. This is systematic persecution of your own reflection. Jung observed that projection serves the shadow's fundamental need to remain unconscious. By locating your greed in your neighbor, your dishonesty in your politician, your rage in your spouse, the shadow maintains its invisibility while you exhaust yourself, policing everyone else's character. The myth of Perseus and Medusa illustrates this perfectly. Perseus could only slay the monster by looking at her reflection in his shield, never directly. Those trapped in projection are forever staring at Medusa directly, paralyzed by the very darkness they refuse to see as their own. Watch the person who constantly complains about their partner's selfishness while demonstrating no awareness of their own self-centered patterns. Observe the manager who rails against their team's incompetence while never examining their own leadership failures. Notice the social crusader who attacks others' hate with hateful rhetoric. Implement what Jung called withdrawing projections. When you feel intense irritation with someone, ask, how am I exactly like this person? For every criticism you voice about others, identify one identical pattern in yourself. The very trait that most disgusts you in others is the shadow's calling card. Sign 5. The fifth sign manifests as emotional explosions that seem to erupt from nowhere. Disproportionate rage at minor inconveniences. Overwhelming sadness triggered by insignificant events. Crippling anxiety about situations that logically pose no real threat. These eruptions reveal the shadow's accumulated pressure. Jung understood that every emotion we refuse to feel, every impulse we reject, every aspect we deny, gets buried in the unconscious where it ferments and grows and eventually explodes. The shadow operates like an emotional pressure cooker. The more you repress, the more violent the eventual release. These disproportionate reactions aren't about the present trigger. They're about decades of unfelt feelings, demanding acknowledgement. Consider the Roman Emperor Caligula, whose unexamined shadow of powerlessness and humiliation eventually consumed him entirely. His disproportionate reactions to minor slights led him to declare war on the ocean, to make his horse a consul, to commit atrocities that defied rational explanation. His emotional explosions revealed not strength, but the absolute terror of a man who had never faced his own powerlessness. Today, this appears as road rage that lasts for hours after a minor traffic incident. Is romantic relationships destroyed by fights over dishes, as careers sabotaged by explosive reactions to ordinary workplace stress. The trigger is never the cause. Practice what Jung called active imagination with your explosive emotions. When you feel disproportionate reaction arising, stop and ask, what is this emotion really about? What deeper wound is being activated? Create an emotional inventory. Track your explosions and identify the patterns beneath the triggers. The shadow always wins until you face it. Sign 4. The fourth sign reveals itself through the cruelest mechanism of all, repetitive self-sabotage. The mysterious force that destroys your success just as you're about to achieve it. The invisible hand that turns your greatest opportunities into your most devastating failures. Jung understood that the unintegrated shadow contains not only our rejected darkness, but also our disowned greatness. The shadow carries our unlived potential, our suppressed power, our forbidden brilliance. When we approach success, the shadow, fearing integration, will literally destroy our progress to maintain its unconscious dominion. This sabotage operates through what Jung called enantiodromia, the unconscious tendency of any extreme position to convert into its opposite. The more desperately you chase success while avoiding shadow work, the more violently the shadow will pull you toward failure. The mythology of Icarus perfectly captures this dynamic. Icarus possessed the gift of flight, his potential for transcendence, but his unexamined shadow of grandiosity and his father's unexamined shadow of fear created the perfect conditions for self-destruction. He flew too close to the sun, not from courage, but from the shadow's desperate need to prove itself. In modern life, observe the entrepreneur who mysteriously makes devastating business decisions just before their breakthrough. The artist who destroys their masterpiece before completion. The person who ends every promising relationship through inexplicable, self-destructive behavior. They're not victims of bad luck. They're prisoners of their unexamined shadow. Implement what Jung called befriending the saboteur. When you notice self-sabotage patterns, dialogue with them. Ask, what are you trying to protect me from? What do you fear will happen if I succeed? Often the sabotage is protecting you from some imagined catastrophe that the shadow associates with your greatness. These first 4 signs, they are merely the shadow's surface operations. Like an iceberg, the visible portion represents only a fraction of the unconscious mass lurking beneath your awareness. What we've explored thus far are the shadow's tactical maneuvers, but the remaining signs, they reveal something far more sinister. They expose the shadow's strategic dominion. These are not merely behavioral patterns. They are existential territories where the unexamined shadow has established complete sovereignty over your soul. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps more than you think. Now let's continue. What I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you believe about your own psychological development. These final signs don't just indicate an unintegrated shadow. They reveal a psyche that has been completely colonized by unconscious forces. Your shadow is not your enemy. Your ignorance is. Sign 3. The third sign reveals itself through a complete absence of genuine empathy, coupled with rigid, merciless judgment toward others. This isn't occasional harshness. This is systematic emotional blindness, masquerading as moral superiority. The unintegrated shadow, desperate to maintain its unconscious status, develops what Jung called a judgmental complex. By positioning yourself as the moral arbiter of others' behavior, the shadow ensures that your attention remains perpetually external. You become incapable of feeling genuine compassion because compassion requires self-recognition. Jung observed that those most lacking in empathy are often those who have completely identified with their moral persona while banishing their own capacity for wrongdoing into the shadow. They literally cannot feel others' pain because feeling others' pain would require acknowledging their own capacity for causing it. The biblical figure of the Pharisee illustrates this perfectly. So identified with his moral righteousness, so convinced of his spiritual superiority, that he became incapable of recognizing divinity in unexpected forms. His shadow contained all his potential for error, for humility, for simple human fallibility. His lack of empathy wasn't a personality flaw, it was spiritual blindness. In contemporary life, observe the person who speaks about toxic people while demonstrating zero curiosity about their own toxicity, the social justice warrior who destroys people's lives over minor infractions while claiming moral authority, the religious leader who preaches love while practicing systematic emotional cruelty. They've achieved the shadow's ultimate victory, moral inflation that prevents all self-examination. Practice what Jung called moral relativism, not as an abdication of values, but as recognition of your own capacity for every crime you condemn. When you feel righteous anger towards someone, ask, how am I capable of the same behavior? Force yourself to find compassion for people you naturally judge. Sign 2. The second sign manifests as chronic, inexplicable emptiness. Despite external achievements, a persistent sense that life lacks meaning, purpose, or genuine substance. This isn't depression. This is existential starvation in the midst of apparent abundance. Jung understood that the unintegrated shadow doesn't just contain our rejected darkness, it contains our authentic vitality. When we spend our lives pursuing goals that serve only our persona while ignoring our shadow's deeper needs, we achieve hollow victories that nourish nothing essential within us. The shadow carries what Jung called our unlived life. The paths we didn't take, the dreams we abandoned, the aspects of ourselves we sacrificed for social acceptance. When the shadow remains unconscious, our conscious achievements feel meaningless because they're disconnected from our deeper, authentic desires. Consider the myth of King Midas, whose ability to turn everything to gold became his curse. His unexamined shadow of greed eventually transformed even love into lifeless metal. He achieved his conscious desire for wealth while losing everything that made life worth living. His emptiness wasn't punishment, it was the inevitable result of pursuing goals that served his ego while starving his soul. Modern life is filled with successful people who feel fundamentally empty. The executive who achieves every career milestone while feeling completely dead inside. The influencer who gains millions of followers while losing connection to their authentic self. The achiever who checks every box while wondering, is this all there is? They've succeeded according to their persona's agenda while neglecting their shadow's deeper hunger. Engage in what Jung called confronting the unlived life. Ask yourself, what did I want to become before the world told me who I should be? What dreams did I abandon? What aspects of myself did I sacrifice for acceptance? Begin small experiments in reclaiming these lost parts of yourself. The price of avoiding your shadow is your soul. Sign 1, the final sign, the most devastating indicator of complete shadow domination, manifests as profound existential crisis coupled with systematic isolation from human connection. This isn't occasional loneliness. This is self-imposed exile from the very relationships that could facilitate your integration. Jung understood that the ultimate goal of shadow work is what he called individuation, becoming a whole person through the integration of all aspects of your psyche. But the unintegrated shadow, terrified of this wholeness, will eventually drive you toward complete isolation to prevent any external mirrors from revealing its presence. The shadow creates isolation through a sophisticated psychological mechanism. It convinces you that you're too dark, too damaged, too fundamentally flawed to deserve genuine connection. It whispers that if people truly knew you, they would abandon you. So you abandon them first. The myth of the hermit speaks to this profound isolation. Having glimpsed the depths of human darkness, both in himself and others, the hermit retreats from all human contact, believing himself to be protecting the world from his contamination. But Jung recognized that this isolation, while seemingly noble, actually serves the shadow's agenda by preventing the integration that only relationship can provide. In modern life, this manifests as the person who claims to be too awakened for ordinary relationships. The individual who retreats into spiritual or intellectual superiority to avoid genuine intimacy. The person who uses their knowledge of psychology to diagnose everyone else while remaining unreachable themselves. They've achieved the shadow's ultimate victory, isolation that masquerades as enlightenment. Practice what Jung called being genuinely known. Choose one person and commit to radical honesty about your flaws, your fears, your shadow material. Allow yourself to be completely seen in your imperfection. The shadow loses its power when it can no longer hide in isolation. Integration is not optional, it's survival. The 7 signs we've unveiled reveal the shadow governing your existence. From defensiveness to isolation, each points to unconscious control over your conscious mind. Yet here lies Jung's paradox. The shadow isn't an adversary, but an ally waiting to be recognized. Every flaw, every act of self-sabotage, every burst of rage, it's the shadow's cry to be seen, integrated, and transformed into strength. The journey calls for the transcendent function, the art of balancing opposites. You must embrace your darkness without being consumed by it, acknowledge your capacity for evil without becoming corrupted, and integrate your shadow without straying from your character. This task is vital. In a world of collective shadows, your individual integration is a moral imperative. Your courage in facing yourself liberates not just you, but others too. Approach this wisdom with discernment. Shadow work isn't about indulging darkness or manipulation. It's about achieving genuine wholeness, fortifying yourself to transcend the ego's confines. The integrated human is humanity's greatest hope. I leave you with this question. Which of these 7 signs resonated most deeply with your own experience? What pattern in your life might be the shadow's calling card, demanding your attention? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And of course, subscribe for more high-value content. The journey into your shadow is not comfortable, but it is necessary. It is the price of genuine freedom. It is the cost of authentic power. It is the pathway to becoming truly human. Your shadow awaits, not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a treasure to be reclaimed. On the screen right now, you'll see a video called Why Everything Feels Off, 7 Warnings from Carl Jung. In it, we expose how your memory is being rewritten, how distraction became the new form of control, and how Jung saw it coming a century ago. Click it, because remembering who you are is only the beginning. Onward, thinkers.